These are the pillars at Arkane that we have those mantras that we put on walls. Some of them were made during Dishonored because, of course, there are common values between the games.
They essentially represent values that we admire and want to put into the game. Nobody works in a vacuum. One of the things we talk about a lot is say yes to the player. The little subtitle there is, if it occurs to players and sounds like fun, let them do it.
In Arkane Austin's previous game, we were always told yes. Yes, we can solve problems in different ways, and yes, we can ignore an objective and watch it play out before our eyes. But when Redfall was released, everything changed. Instead of being told yes, we were always told no. Can we beat this mission in any other way without finding a key to a door? No, unfortunately, you can't. When Redfall launched in May 2023, it was labelled as one of the worst games of the year. It was severely broken, with bugs, technical issues and brain-dead enemies, and a general feeling that the game needed more work. Arkane Austin's first attempt at a co-op looter shooter had completely backfired, and Redfall was severely outmatched by its competition. As I unravelled this mess, I learnt how flawed Arkane's approach to Redfall was. I learnt of its confusing origin and its troubled development, and I relived those misleading previews and Xbox's damage control. The writing was on the wall from the start, but Arkane didn't realise they were heading straight into a storm. But over the past year, Arkane Austin has been hard at work improving the game. They released 4 big updates, and even added new systems to the game, systems that are genuinely great. Redfall was on its journey to redemption, but sadly that journey was cut short in May this year, when Xbox closed Arkane Austin for good. As no further updates will ever reach Redfall, this video will be one final look at the game, for better or worse. This is the story of Redfall, from development to release to 1 year later.
Redfall has released from Arkane Austin. Low reviews and a lot of disappointment from many fans.
Arkane Austin is a studio known for making immersive sims. They supported their sister studio Arkane Leon on the development of Dishonored 1 and later went on to release Prey in 2017. Prey is an outstanding immersive sim. It included multiple ways to tackle every problem, and a narrative with one of the most shocking endings I've ever experienced. If we think about the type of games that Prey and Redfall are, there are very few similarities between them. One is single player, while the other is a 4-player looter shooter. So why would a studio make a game in a genre that doesn't suit their skill set? Well, back in 2018, when Arkane were brainstorming ideas for their next game, there was pressure from ZeniMax Media, the company that owns Bethesda Softworks, who in turn own Arkane. In 2018, ZeniMax were encouraging their studios to create games with a constant revenue stream, like live services and in-game stores with microtransactions. We saw evidence of this around this time, with the release of Fallout 76 and Wolfenstein Youngblood, 2 franchises that were historically single-player that now happen to include ham-fisted in-game monetization. On launch, both of these games were received terribly, with low review scores and outrage from the fans. I mean, we all know the saga of Fallout 76 on launch, although Bethesda have turned this around over the years. The commercial reasoning for Redfall makes perfect sense, as Prey didn't sell well. Although Prey was close to the top of the charts the week it was released, multiple sources online suggest it was down compared to Dishonored 1 and 2. And for a relatively big budget game, this was not good. Alongside this, Arkane Austin wanted to make something with a broader appeal, whether this was for financial reasons or not. Harvey Smith, the studio head at Arkane Austin, highlighted that Arkane has been making immersive sims for quite some time, and they wanted to try something new. They wanted to make their first open world game, a game that was bigger than anything they'd made before. Redfall then would be like Far Cry crossed with Borderlands, but more like Far Cry 2, an RPG shooter hybrid with dynamic systems in the open world. These reference points were completely different to Prey or Dishonored, but one thing was clear. Redfall would still have Arkane's creative values at its heart, and even though it would be different, fans of the studio had nothing to fear. The single-player component would still be a classic Arkane experience. When development started on Redfall, Arkane decided not to use their in-house Void engine or use CryEngine that powered Prey. Instead, Unreal Engine 4 would be used to develop the game. The switch in engine wouldn't be an issue though, as Arkane were familiar with Unreal from their work on the first Dishonored. Roundhouse Studios were brought onto the project as co-developers to help Arkane with their first multiplayer title. Roundhouse Studios were previously known as Human Head Studios, a company dating back to 1997 who even developed the original Prey in 2006. Human Head Studios was shut down in 2019 after being acquired by Bethesda, who then reopened them as Roundhouse. Before being shut down, Human Head Studios' last game was Rune 2, a hack and slasher based on Norse mythology. It seemed like an odd choice considering how different Rune 2 was to Redfall, but there are two important things to note here. Rune 2 was also made in Unreal and featured a 4-player co-op campaign. It's likely then that Roundhouse were brought onto the project because of their past experience with multiplayer and Unreal. However, this is where things get muddy, as the reception to Rune 2 was less than ideal. On launch, Rune 2 was widely panned, as it was full of technical issues and bugs for both single-player and online play. The controls were apparently dreadful, and the visuals look 5 years out of date, even on high-end PCs. It wasn't exactly a strong start, but maybe history wouldn't repeat itself with Redfall.
Here comes the heat. This ain't my fight.
So, the Redfall team was assembled. We had a single-player focused studio in Arkane Austin, and a team whose last game was a disaster, plus a handful of outsourced studios to help ease the workload. But even in these early stages, it already seemed like Redfall would be an uphill battle. Were Arkane Austin trying to run before they learnt to walk? Or did they simply underestimate the complexities that came with making a multiplayer game?
I think so.
The jump to multiplayer also created problems that wouldn't have existed in Arkane's previous games. Arkane now had to deal with servers, live accounts, anti-cheat systems, the possibility of matchmaking, and more. Multiplayer even affected the kind of physics Arkane could use. On top of this, the size of Redfall added further complexity. It disrupted how Arkane approached their level design, as they were used to linear levels like in Dishonored, or a series of small open areas connected by loading screens in Prey. In Dishonored, for example, because each level is linear and the surrounding city is closed off to us, it means the number of points for different paths, encounters, or environmental storytelling is low. But in Redfall, the space surrounding a level isn't closed off to us, as we can explore the entire open world however we want. Harvey Smith estimated that the number of points went from 8 in their previous games to 50 in Redfall, over 6 times the amount of work for the team. This meant Arkane needed to work harder to give Redfall the level of detail the studio was known for. They'd need more audio logs, more written notes, and more environmental storytelling. Was there a risk of spreading the team too thin as the studio scrambled to pad out the world in interesting ways? The workload was already piling up, but there were still questions that needed to be answered. The biggest question mark around Redfall was how the game would work. Arkane were faced with the most basic questions that were only asked due to their inexperience in multiplayer. Questions that studios familiar with multiplayer games would have already answered during their previous projects. Questions like, could 4 people play as the same character? Or does a character get locked out if one person selects them? Or how would endgame characters play with low-level characters who are just starting out? Would it be like Elder Scrolls Online, where enemies are individually scaled to match our level? Or would all enemies be the same level for everyone in a party? If I join a game with a level 20 character, does that mean my level 1 friend is forced to fight enemies that are 19 levels above him? Or do I fight enemies that are at level 1? But the main question Arkane struggled to answer was how the immersive sim mechanics would work in this looter shooter. Looter shooters are fast-paced and less mechanically driven, so how would Arkane's in-depth systems work in this format? It would be like trying to add complex stealth mechanics to Borderlands, or transplanting Prey's powers into Destiny 2. Is there any need to transform yourself into a cup when most of the game involves shooting enemies in the head? The answers to these big questions would only become clear when Redfall was released, but for now, development continued, and Arkane were unaware some difficult circumstances were waiting around the next corner.
In our series State of Testing, experts say some states are still not doing enough coronavirus tests, and we are 4 months now into the pandemic.
Between 2020 and 2021, the development of Redfall took another blow, as a global pandemic forced the team into lockdown. Like many companies, I imagine the transition from working in an office to working at home was not easy, especially as we battled to keep ourselves safe and sane. In a generous move, Arkane gave their team Fridays off during the worst of the pandemic, to help people come to terms with their new but temporary way of life. When Arkane finally returned to the office, it seemed fate wasn't on their side, as 2 serious hurricanes knocked out their power for up to 10 days, slamming the brakes on development until everything came back online. Harvey Smith went on record and said the development of Redfall had been an unbelievable ordeal and Arkane's most challenging game ever. In June 2021, it was time for the last ever E3. Now it was time for Arkane Austin to show Redfall to the world. A flashy cinematic trailer gave us an impression of what to expect, and we were introduced to Redfall's main characters. The abilities for each character, like a magic lift or psychic umbrella, were well received, but not everybody was convinced on the premise. Many people said it looked generic and too similar to Left 4 Dead, while others were unsure on the tone. But there was one key piece of information that was revealed. For fans of Arkane, there was something to mark in our calendar. Redfall was set to release in the summer of 2022. As the release of Redfall grew closer, Arkane invited journalists to play the game in a series of single and multiplayer previews. In a few weeks from now, there would be controversy around everything we're about to discuss, but initially, I imagine Arkane were ecstatic with the results.
Yes, killing vampires in Redfall feels good.
Across the board, the previews were extremely positive, with several game outlets excited to play more. The coverage from God is a Geek suggested Redfall could be a Game of the Year contender, and PC Games N agreed, saying Redfall had the potential to be one of the best PC games of 2023. Even IGN's multiplayer preview sang Redfall's praises and described how the game was great with 2 to 4 players. Of course, this was a small preview, but mostly there was no cause for concern. A few outlets like GameSpot said the controls felt off and highlighted they couldn't be fully tweaked in the menu, and the immersive sim mechanics were also questioned. But GameSpot highlighted this was expected due to the type of game Redfall was. The biggest shock was that there was no takedown animation in the game. Instead, we had the assassination mechanic from Halo from 2001. Plus, there were question marks around the bland loot game and repetitive mission structure. But almost every time, these concerns were downplayed, probably as everyone trusted Arkane based on their track record. Many outlets said Redfall was different, but maybe with a bit of getting used to, it would click like Prey or Dishonored. One thing was clear though, the overriding message from the previews was that Redfall was good, and maybe Arkane had done it after all. This would have been true if Arkane didn't release footage for everyone to see. Some of the footage from Redfall simply didn't match what games journalists were saying. The 4-player footage from IGN made Redfall look awful. The footage showed a game with bland visuals that looked like it was running on an Xbox 360, which is exactly the same issue Rune 2 had on launch. Textures looked flat, and the character models were like plasticine cartoons, with an odd reflection that didn't look right. The enemy AI was also an issue, as they stood out in the open waiting to be shot, all while IGN struggled to keep their aim on target. This was likely the issue with the controls, highlighted by GameSpot, but then this went against other outlets who said combat felt great. A lot of people tore into IGN and questioned their ability to play video games. Soon after upload, the video had 1,400 likes and 15,000 dislikes. For a game that was already misunderstood, these previews and mixed messages confused everyone further. So far, things weren't going to plan, but Redfall took another blow when Arkane made an official announcement.
Early this morning, Bethesda dropped a few details on how its upcoming supernatural shooter Redfall is going to run on consoles. If you're a frame rate nerd like me, you might not like this. Redfall
would already launch with no offline mode even when playing single player, but now the game would run at 30 frames per second on Series X and S. Not 60 FPS like we were shown in the previews or trailers. You can clearly see here that the footage of Redfall, shown at Xbox's Developer Direct in January 2023, shows the game running at a higher frame rate, except this was no longer true for anybody on console. Pre-ordering Redfall at this stage was a massive risk, especially given the hefty price tag. The regular version was $70, with the Bite Back edition priced at $100. The Bite Back edition included extra skins and 2 additional heroes that were planned later down the line. Whether that's worth an extra $30 or not is up to you. For most of us though, Game Pass would be a safer way to try out Redfall when it finally released in May 2023.
Be disappointed. I'm disappointed. I'm upset with myself.
When Redfall was released on the 2nd of May 2023, it was instantly clear that something wasn't right. As soon as players got their hands on the game, they were faced with visual glitches and game-breaking bugs, a ton of technical issues, and systems that felt half-finished. It turned out Redfall was broken on launch. Character animations would bug out, as character models were caught T-posing, or they would move through the world in strange ways. Co-op partners slid along the floor or climbed ladders like this. and people got stuck in crouch mode or an infinite sprint animation. For others, the crouch button straight up broke and wouldn't let them crouch unless they exited to the main menu and rejoined the game. At times, unresponsive buttons broke the game so badly that people couldn't exit the character menu, while others lost all control during an infinite loading screen. One game-breaking bug is bad enough, but Redfall was full of them. Quest items wouldn't spawn in the world, stopping people from completing a mission, and the PC ports wouldn't start for many people, or it would crash seconds after booting up. If people were lucky and avoided these bugs that halted their progress, they would then be faced with more issues whenever they engaged in combat. Enemies got stuck in the environment or spawned underneath the map, which meant we couldn't shoot them through the floor, but then somehow they could shoot us. And other times, combat would be locked in a stalemate as our bullets phased through an enemy, or an enemy stood there uninterested in fighting us. Enemies were unresponsive across the board and ruined Redfall's combat. The enemies were so stupid that they couldn't detect us after we took down their teammate standing right next to them, and the promise that stealth would be based on sight and sound was ironically nowhere to be seen. Most times, the enemy had no idea we were right behind them, or they didn't hear the noise we were making nearby. Then when enemies did spot us, they had the reaction times of a sloth. They were so slow to respond that we could charge at an enemy and no-scope them point blank before they even fired a bullet. This made the enemies too easy to defeat and made them look like idiots.
I see ya!
Their dumb AI played out before us as they refused to take cover, or they turn up for work with the wrong weapon equipped. Enemies standing at the back of an arena would shoot at us with a shotgun, while enemies with snipers charged straight at us like they were playing an assault class. Even the vampire enemies, the main selling point for the game, were completely broken. A vampire's lunging attack could be easily avoided by simply walking backwards and slightly to the left, and the Rook, one of Redfall's tougher enemies, could be beaten by standing 2 feet off the ground. By standing on the roof of a car, the Rook's AI broke as he paced around the arena and couldn't figure out how to get us. Other times, the pathing was so broken, we could put an object between us and a vampire to stop them attacking. Overall, the combat system was unbalanced. Not only could vampires be easily outsmarted, but certain weapons were also too powerful. Most human enemies died with a single shot to the head, while other weapons like the stake launcher decimated vampires with ease. Clearly, the combat was not good, as Redfall struggled to get the most basic fundamentals right. The controls for shooting on console were absolutely abysmal. Aim assistance was absent or so minimal it went unnoticed, and our aim was too slow when we used ADS. As GameSpot highlighted in their preview, there was a lack of customization options to fix this, other than overall sensitivity. Some reviews reported that tweaking the controls helped, but not enough to make the game feel good. It was far too sluggish. Digital Foundry's review was equally as critical of Redfall's technical state. The locked frame rate at 30 FPS on consoles was already a blow, but at times, Redfall dropped to the low 20s when certain effects like fire or the vampire's red mist was on screen. 30 FPS is not good for a first-person shooter, but 22 when fighting the main enemy in the game is unacceptable. It screamed of poor optimization, with atrocious textures and assets everywhere in the game. Textures took an age to load in, and even shadows were blurry. You can see here in the fire station, this emblem takes an astonishing 18 seconds to load on the Series X.
Arkane's console games have unfortunately often launched with technical hiccups in the past, but Redfall is the worst offender to date.
These technical issues were glaringly obvious for anybody who played the game, but even if the textures, lighting or frame rates worked properly, the overall presentation was well below a next-gen AAA game. Many reviews highlighted that Redfall looked like a last-gen title, just as people had commented after watching IGN's preview footage. The cutscenes in particular were one of Redfall's low points. They showed lifeless character models standing around with no animation, with a generic voiceover played over the top. I mean, this is not only unacceptable, but it showcases more dodgy marketing tactics from Arkane and Bethesda. We were shown these slick, pre-rendered trailers to sell us the game. Then when we finally played Redfall, we got this.
1. My name is Layla Ellison. 2. Redfall is full of blood-sucking monsters. And 3. I have these weird powers.
Elsewhere, the narrative was told to us through these blue ghosts in the main missions. It was a massive step back for Arkane, who always made sure to have their characters act out in-game and in front of our eyes. Redfall received atrocious review scores, picking up 4 out of 10s from GameSpot and IGN. PC Mag UK gave Redfall a tasty 1.5 out of 5, which is an extremely low score for a studio of this caliber. Dishonored 1, for example, received a 9.2 from IGN back in 2012. These low scores are given to the most broken or poorly developed games, like the GTA Definitive Editions or Fallout 76, not an Arkane game. Well, that is unless IGN reviews Prey. In a cruel twist of fate, Redfall received the same review score from IGN as Prey. For anyone who's followed Prey, you'll know that IGN's review score was controversial, and the review score was given due to a game-breaking bug on PC. The bug was fixed after launch, and to make amends, IGN revisited Prey 4 years later, and gave it a respectable 8 out of 10, double that of Redfall. At the time of writing, Redfall sits at 56 on Metacritic, with a woeful user score of 3.1 out of 10. This makes Redfall one of the worst scored games of 2023. As the reviews flooded in, the controversy surrounding Redfall started to rise. A lot of outlets trashing the game on release were the very same companies who were singing its praises a few weeks earlier. Many players highlighted that these issues were glaringly obvious within the first few hours of playing Redfall. So why then did nobody warn us? The brain-dead enemies can even be seen in IGN's preview footage. And sure, some outlets had concerns, but they were always minor and nowhere near as drastic as the issues we got in the final game. This must have been insulting to anyone who trusted the previews and paid to pre-order the game. What should have been an honest look at Redfall before release now seemed like another misleading marketing campaign. Redfall was sold to us as a classic Arkane experience when playing solo, yet we couldn't even play offline or pause the game at any point. To calm the storm, Phil Spencer took to the stage and answered a series of tough questions on the Kinda Funny podcast on May 4th, 2023. 2 days after Redfall's release.
What up, homie? How are you?
During the interview, Phil looked disappointed, defeated almost, and at one point he openly said he could be fired if things didn't improve. Phil suggested that delaying Redfall again wouldn't have fixed the game. Sure, there were bugs, glitches and crashes, but the overriding message was that Redfall failed creatively. Xbox threw Arkane under the bus as they were told they'd not delivered on their creative vision. Translation: Arkane had failed. In actual fact though, Xbox couldn't escape the blame, as one of Phil's points was a serious red flag. He explained that Xbox's internal review process had scored Redfall double digits higher than its mid-50 average. What on earth happened internally at Xbox if they thought this game, in this state, was at least a 70 or 80 out of 100? Did they play a different build, or was Xbox simply out of touch with gaming today if they couldn't see that Redfall was a mess? By the end of the interview, Phil had calmed the storm to a certain degree. He provided an insight into Xbox, while admitting the 60 frames per second issue wasn't handled correctly. Above all though, Phil assured everyone they were committed to fixing Redfall, and in the weeks that followed, Arkane got back to work. The first update arrived 3 days after Phil's interview, in Redfall's first hotfix. 2 game-breaking bugs were fixed, and the stability of Redfall servers was improved. Then Arkane went quiet for the next month, unaware things were about to get much, much worse.
Basically, this is a story of corporate greed, of mismanagement, and of a company that didn't really know what they were making or why they were making it. Strap in, this one's a little crazy.
A month later, on June 1st, 2023, Jason Schreier from Bloomberg published an expose on the development of Redfall by interviewing anonymous developers who worked on the game. Jason's article shone new light on Redfall's release by highlighting a series of issues that plagued development. It turned out there were more than just technical challenges, as Arkane's developers grew frustrated with the game. As Arkane was known for immersive sims, many developers questioned the decision to make a game that was outside their area of expertise. When games like Borderlands and Far Cry were used as reference points, the team became confused on what they were making, as these games were different to Arkane. As development went on and the frustrations grew, morale at the studio dropped. A lot of Arkane's developers had no interest in making a multiplayer game, so they decided to leave the company. According to Bloomberg, around 70% of the people who started on Redfall left during its development. This ruptured an already small team size of 100 people, which for a live service game is not big enough to compete with other games out there, games made by studios that have hundreds of developers working at once. Arkane outsourced support and had help from Roundhouse, but as we know, this didn't fix the game in time. That last point is interesting, because clearly Arkane was struggling, yet Xbox didn't give them enough support. Apparently Xbox was hands-off with Redfall, perhaps because they were focused on Bethesda and Starfield at the time, their biggest game of this generation. It would have made sense to assign other Xbox studios to help Arkane out, who were familiar with Unreal Engine, like Rare and the Coalition. In the Kinda Funny interview, Phil explains that these teams did help out when the 60 FPS issue was discovered, but by that point it was clearly too late. Throughout the rest of the year and into 2024, Redfall would receive 4 big updates. The number of enemies on the map was increased to make the world feel more alive, and enemy responsiveness was improved across the board, including vampire attacks to stop us outsmarting them by walking backwards. But by far the biggest updates were the addition of a 60 FPS performance mode on console, actual stealth takedowns, and in-depth control customization on Xbox. Plus, there are brand new weapons and systems, like a new type of vampire nest, and a leveling system that gives us new perks. And for anyone wanting to play single player, we can now play offline and finally pause the game. There are of course a ton of fixes on top of this, but already you can see that the main issues have been fixed, and new systems have even been added to enhance the game. But is 1 year of work enough to make Redfall great? Is Redfall finally worth our time 1 year later? Okay, it's now been over a year since Redfall released its final update, and I'm here to tell you that Redfall is good now. Or rather, Redfall is good for about 15 hours, and then it becomes infuriatingly dull in the final third of the game. There's simply not enough depth to its systems or enough variety in its loot to maintain the pace of the early game. And unfortunately, Redfall is a failure in the areas that matter. But before we tear into the game, I want to discuss the great things in Redfall and the improvements that have been made over the past year. These updates show that Arkane were heading in the right direction before their time was cut short. They've turned Redfall from one of the worst games of 2023 to a game that's worth your time, depending on the type of gamer you are. For me, as someone who loves exploration in games like Skyrim and Fallout 4, Redfall ticks a lot of boxes, and if you're the same, maybe it's worth giving Redfall a shot. All of my footage is captured on a Series X using the most up-to-date version of the game, and I played mostly in single player, although I did spend 4 hours with 2 of my mates to test out the multiplayer. I also haven't tried Redfall on PC, but one of my mates did, and I'll discuss his experiences in the review. First up, visuals. The visuals have seen some improvements since launch, as the issues with blurry textures and shadows have been addressed. It's hard to know whether there have been official improvements on top of this, but compared to the footage on YouTube from launch, Redfall looks 10 times better today. Of course, there's some compression involved on YouTube, and playing on my own 4K HDR monitor helps, but overall, Redfall looks great and definitely nothing like a last-gen title. The lighting, for example, is volumetric and bounces realistically off surfaces. Metal textures have a nice shine, and light bounces off walls to illuminate dark spaces. Redfall is a great example of how lighting can make a game atmospheric, as they always stop to take in the scene and appreciate how Arkane chose to light it. They do a great job of creating a spooky atmosphere, where exploring in the middle of the night with a flashlight always kept me on the edge of my seat. It's clear that Arkane's artists are extremely talented, as we can see this everywhere in Redfall. We have incredible visual set pieces and a handful of otherworldly psychic spaces that are all interesting to explore. Obviously, Redfall doesn't look as good as single-player games, but Arkane does enough to make the game feel next-gen, especially considering this is 4-player co-op. I'd even go as far to say that Redfall looks like the footage we were shown during those early trailers. We now have a 60 FPS performance mode and customization options to tweak the game. Occasionally, we'll still see a frame rate drop, but I doubt you would notice this issue unless you were looking for it. My mate playing on his gaming PC also said Redfall was smooth and ran well, so that's great to hear. It's not all perfect though, as the presentation is still flat at times. The environmental textures like rock or wood are not good, especially during the day. Redfall always looks better at night because these dodgy textures are harder to spot, and it allows the lighting to take centre stage. In other areas, it's obvious Redfall had a rushed development, as certain artifacts from launch have not been fixed. First off, all the NPCs have gigantic hands, like they're wearing those Hulk hand toys aimed at 10-year-olds. It doesn't matter whether the NPC is tall, small, fat or thin, everyone in this world has massive hands. This sort of works with Dishonored's art style, but here it just looks odd. NPCs also stand around lifelessly in their designated spots and stare into space, never moving their eyes or blinking. The only way to make them blink is by talking to them, which triggers a pre-programmed line of dialogue or small animation. Then once they finish speaking, they revert to their idle state and stare into the abyss. Arkane tries to add realism by animating NPCs at our base, but Arkane's approach is far too basic, as Arkane programs the NPCs with an endless animation loop. This NPC here was doing sit-ups in the Maritime Centre every time I passed by. No matter what time of day or night I returned to base, he was always there. And get this, I even saw this NPC in the open world as a civilian hostage several times. I mean, maybe it is the same person, who keeps getting captured before rushing back to the Maritime Centre to work on his abs. But it's more likely Arkane didn't have enough characters to pad out the game, and were forced to reuse them for different scenarios. Okay, so you might be thinking, well, this is fine. These are just random people used to pad out the world. I'm sure the main characters are much better. No, they're not. No. The main characters also stand there staring into space, and look like animatronics instead of human beings. Sometimes we will see them having a group conversation in a different spot, as Arkane tries to convince us they're real people. But it just doesn't work. They still stand there with their arms by their sides staring blankly at each other, all while we eavesdrop on the conversation. We're never given the option to join in or ask our opinion about anything that's being discussed. We only ever watch from the sidelines. Oh, and one time, there was this serious conversation, but for some reason a hip-hop track played over the top, which I think was a bug, but I found it pretty funny.
What the hell kind of question? Well, what if I was sick? Cancer?
If you at the bar right now, put your fucking drinks down!
Aside from the presentation, there have been massive improvements to other parts of the game, like the combat. Overall, the combat is more balanced now. On the second hardest difficulty, a group of 3 cultists could be taken down with ease, but when vampires join the fight, it always kept me on my toes. The vampires are an interesting enemy, because they teleport around the arena and dodge side to side, forcing us to adjust our aim. It adds something unique to Redfall, as we can't simply retreat to high ground or dive behind cover like we can in other shooters. If we did retreat to a rooftop, a vampire just teleports up to us, forcing us to continue the fight as we try not to fall off the edge. The improvements to their attacks has drastically helped too, as they'll often hit us even when we're on the move. Thankfully, this issue from launch has now been fixed. The improvements to the Rook aren't as groundbreaking, as a few of the issues from launch are still present. Sometimes the Rook still bugs out. If we stand somewhere off the ground, he never spawns in until we get down. Then when he does spawn in, he bugs out again if we return to our spot. You can see here, he spawns in, then something weird happens because I'm not on the ground, then he instantly spawns out again. It's not as bad as it was on launch, as the Rook will sometimes teleport up to get us, but I'd say this happened once every 3 fights throughout my playthrough. It's such a shame, because this mechanic didn't get the respect it deserved on launch. It acts as a sort of Assassin's Creed Odyssey bounty system, where our actions in the game increase the Rook meter. Then when the meter is full, the environment darkens, and we see these bright red lightning bolts dart down from the sky. It's a great example of a dynamic system that flips the game on its head when you least expect it. A Rook will often spawn at the worst moment, like after a boss fight when we're low on resources. When the Rook fights work, they're some of the best in the game. I just wish it was fixed today, so I can talk about how good it is without being negative. For the human enemies, their AI is also a mixed bag. It's true that a lot of issues from launch have been fixed, but there's still some that are lingering today. The good news is, enemies now spot us based on sight and sound. They'll spot us if we poke out of cover, or hear us if we make a noise nearby, like smashing into a room or swapping weapons behind them. It's a shame then that once we're spotted, the enemies still act like idiots. Sometimes they do get into cover or flank us as a group, but mostly they stand out in the open waiting to be shot, just like they did on launch. The cultist enemies struggle when they're fighting in open spaces, as there's nothing around them to use as cover and they can't figure out what to do. It's almost like we can see their programming play out before us. They'll walk forwards, then when they get in range to shoot us, they immediately open fire, standing in the same spot. Their tactics are rarely complex enough to challenge us, and if you're familiar with any shooter, I doubt the cultists would be a threat to you. Like, they all follow the same path, and run into our line of fire like lemmings. During this encounter set in a shipyard, you can see 2 enemies mantled up the same ledge back to back, while a third ran up the stairs with his back to me. And just like we had on launch, cultists still sit back with shotguns and shoot us across an arena. We then easily line up a headshot and take them down with no thought. This is the dominant strategy in Redfall, by the way, as humans die easily from headshots. I get that Arkane wants this to be realistic, but we have to remember this is a game with RPG stats on our weapons. Arkane even gives us perks that boost headshot damage, exacerbating the problem further. One of the rarer weapons in the game gives us a whopping 75% bonus headshot damage, which turns the cultists from a viable enemy into cannon fodder. Maybe Arkane are trying to make us feel powerful here, but considering Redfall is supposed to be a game with multiple ways to play, they have accidentally shot themselves in the foot. Because headshots are the dominant strategy, there is absolutely no need to use stealth in the game. Sure, there's a new stake takedown which feels great to use, but I can count the number of times I use stealth on one hand. Arkane could have added more here. There should be something like 1.5 times damage if we shoot an enemy undetected, which increases to 2 times damage if we have a silenced weapon. This would have encouraged us to use stealth to start an encounter, as we use the bonus damage to land a powerful shot before charging in with our weapons. Oh, and this was a feature in Prey, by the way. We get bonus stealth damage in Prey, but for some reason, it's not included in Redfall. As stealth isn't viable, we're always forced down one route, using our weapons and abilities. We never have a Swiss Army knife style weapon that can be used for different things. We don't have a glue cannon that can freeze enemies in combat, help us move around the environment, or put out fires or dampen electricity. We can see Arkane attempt this with the UV gun, which petrifies vampires and also clears the map of red mist. But compared to the depth we had in Prey, this is only scratching the surface. But what's interesting about this is that Arkane has taken the depth from Prey and added it to our character abilities in Redfall, and thankfully, this saves the combat. The main issue on launch was that the abilities were like Arkane took the powers from Dishonored and divided them into 4. Unfortunately, this is still present, as we only get 3 abilities per character. There's a bit of ability sharing when we play multiplayer, but for anyone playing solo, we're locked into our character with no AI companions. If we decide to play solo, we're also funneled towards certain characters, as Redfall is much easier if we have a traversal ability. Jake and Remy don't have this, which makes it difficult to get around the map. It's also clear that Remy is designed as a support class, as her ultimate is a flag that heals anybody in its aura. I just don't see why you would pick Remy unless you're playing with mates. This means if we're playing Redfall single player, it's best to choose Layla or Dev. There's ladders and ways to clamber up to rooftops, but this always takes much longer compared to Layla's lift or Dev's transponder. I chose Layla because she's best suited for single player. She has a telekinetic umbrella that absorbs bullets before we fire it back at our enemies, and her ultimate calls in her ex-vampire boyfriend for support. Aside from these abilities being extremely creative, Arkane adds a surprising amount of depth here. I'll just go over the lift ability to show you what I mean. Layla's lift is great for exploring. It cancels out fall damage, which is a great shortcut when we're exploring somewhere off the ground, and the lift can also save us if we accidentally fall off an edge. The lift is also great for gliding across the map, as we use it like a giant jump pad. This has a great sense of momentum as we glide gracefully through the air, but it's also handy for breaching buildings by bouncing through a window. The window might be open, but we can also use our melee attack to smash the glass, just like we could in Prey. Once Layla's lift is upgraded, it becomes even more complicated. We can unlock a skill, for example, that boosts our damage and reloads our weapons in double time when we bounce off the lift. This creates a great rhythm to combat, where we unload our clip on the ground before bouncing into the air for a quick reload, and then rain bullets down from above using the damage boost. Later on, a skill also sends out shockwaves when we use the lift that burns away vampires without the need to use a stake, saving us time and making us more efficient in combat. On top of this, we can link up back-to-back lifts to scale huge cliffs, and enemies that use the lift will also be flung into the air. There's a few more uses here, but already you can see this isn't one-dimensional, and I could talk about Layla's umbrella in exactly the same way. Not every skill in the game is this groundbreaking, as some are extremely bland. There's some pretty basic skills, like being able to carry more ammo, and a few skills designed for co-op play. It feels like they're here to pad out the skill tree as Arkane rush to finish the game, because you can basically ignore this side of the skill tree and it wouldn't affect your game at all. It definitely didn't affect mine. In terms of bugs and technical issues, Redfall is in a much better state 1 year later, where almost all of the main issues on launch have been fixed. Unfortunately though, I still saw a few bugs and issues in the game. I saw enemies stuck in the environment, or T-posing in the distance, and one time my cloak was stuck on and wouldn't disappear. I then had to exit the game and rejoin to fix the problem. There's also still crashes on Series X, in both single and multiplayer. One time my mate on PC had his version crash, while my other mate was randomly booted from our game. Then when he rejoined, all of his inventory had been wiped and he had no weapons. You can see here that he's running through the world with no weapon equipped on his character. That last one is horrendous. Imagine spending tens of hours chasing the best weapons in the game, only to get everything deleted when you played online. Redfall is supposed to be a multiplayer game, yet playing online could delete your entire inventory. I only played multiplayer for a short time, so imagine how many more issues we'd see over the entire campaign. Although most things have been fixed, there are still technical issues in Redfall 1 year later. Okay, let's look at the 2 new systems that Arkane added to Redfall in its final update before Xbox shut them down. The Community Standing is a brand new perk tree that we level up by completing activities in the open world. It rewards us for helping out the people of Redfall, so we earn XP by rescuing civilians or clearing out vampire underbosses, as well as a few other things. The perks are designed to make Redfall more rewarding or our character more powerful. We'll take less damage from Rook lightning bolts, or unlock an ability that heals us to full when we're about to die. It pads out Redfall by adding a feedback loop to activities that were lackluster on launch. With the new perks, I always rescued civilians or completed the bland safehouse missions, as they now go towards the next Community Standing level. Plus, we can make these activities more rewarding with a perk that gives us loot drops every time we rescue someone in the open world. This system fixes a major issue from launch, as the main currency in the game used to be useless. Basically, we earn support by scavenging for items or breaking down our weapons, and previously we could only spend this on resources at our base or to buy weapons from the armory. Just to give you an idea of how broken this was on launch, I had over 400,000 support at one point, yet the most expensive weapons in the armory cost about 30,000 near the end of my playthrough. Clearly, these numbers don't match up. The Community Standing fixes this issue because we unlock the perks using support, giving us something else to spend our money on. Eventually, this does drop off because we'll have all the perks we need by the end of the game. Support is easy to accumulate as it is, but then some of these perks double the amount of support for items or make weapon drops more common. I was showered with weapons by the end of the game and was breaking down tens of thousands of support in every hour I played. I think more levels or tweaking to the system would have helped, but for those 15 hours or so, it is an addictive loop and a great change to Redfall. The Elder Vampire Nests don't drastically change the game in the same way, but they do enhance the vampire nests already in the game. In the base game, the vampire nests were Arkane's take on a classic dungeon, where we load into an instance and fight towards the vampire heart. Then we destroy the heart and have a fixed amount of time to loot the room and escape before the nest collapses. It's one of the best features in the game, as Arkane gives us interesting spaces to fight through, where 1 minute we'll be on a farm, then the next we're heading downtown into the cinema, before destroying the heart at Christmas time in Redfall. The new Elder Nests build on this idea, but instead of giving us a dungeon to run, they place us in an arena where we fight an Elder Vampire boss. This is one of the special vampires we see in the regular game, but this time Arkane has given them a big health bar and a unique moveset. One boss creates copies of themselves and floods the arena with vampire clones, whereas another fires out a huge ball of fire that we shoot to stop it exploding. Ironically, these are the best boss fights in the game, and it shows that Arkane were starting to get into a rhythm of designing content for Redfall. There is a missed opportunity here though, as Redfall doesn't have matchmaking in the game. I wish there was a Vampire Nest playlist that we could queue up from the main menu and clear nests with random people. But for some reason, there's no matchmaking whatsoever. If you want to play Redfall online with strangers, you have to use an LFG, and pray the awkwardness doesn't cringe you into oblivion. These improvements have addressed most of the issues that plagued Redfall on launch. They've made Redfall more playable and allowed the best parts of the game to rise to the surface. And this is why I think Redfall is good now, or at least it has good parts. The setting of a Massachusetts town is full of interesting spaces to explore, from downtown tourist areas to cemeteries, lighthouses, hiking paths and trailer parks, with spaces that range from tight alleys to wide open pastures. These locations are all packed with detail. The interior spaces are padded out with individual 3D models all rendered in high resolution. And there's even museums in the game with actual exhibitions we can visit and learn about the world. Arkane's fingerprints are all over this world, like the way they show us the history of the Maritime Centre, just like they did with Talos 1 in Prey. Just like their previous games, Arkane has designed Redfall with a rich history, where one of the best things in the game is exploring the map and piecing together everything that's happened here. Most locations have great environmental storytelling, or they're full of notes that tell us a mini-story. A lot of people said on launch that the notes were quantity over quality, and that the world felt lifeless, but I just didn't get that at all. The number of enemies on the map has been increased to pad out the world, and I found that 80% of the notes were great. There's the odd note that's filler or poorly written, but it's not that many on the whole. There are too many stories to go through, but I want to tell you about one example that was one of the most incredible moments I've had in a game in recent memory. In the second half of the game, we can explore this trailer park. We go around and learn about the residents struggling to get work, and we see their cramped living space. At the top of the park is a huge house, which we learn belongs to the trailer park's landlord. Already, we're being shown something interesting about class or wealth or whatever. But the best part about this is that we see a note from the landlord's nanny. The nanny says that she's taken the landlord's baby out for a walk. So far, there's nothing out of the ordinary here. This is probably a routine day in the lives of these people. Except when we head to a nearby trailer, we see a note saying that the nanny is bringing an offering to the vampires. We then go round the corner and see a baby's outfit framed like this. Yep, the nanny stole the landlord's baby and sacrificed it to the vampire gods. Like, what the hell? This is one story out of 50, if not 100 in Redfall, with so many more waiting for us to find completely on our own, with no map markers or waypoints. Outside of the missions, Redfall doesn't use map markers to show us where to explore. The only way we find these stories is by exploring every building or neighbourhood with no guide. We're often shown something interesting is nearby, as Arkane flash an icon on our HUD. Or they'll use flares to show us where our objective is. Or they'll use a flock of crows that circle a unique building. It's a really clever way of encouraging us to explore, rather than using the generic methods we see in other games. Of course, some buildings are bare, some don't have environmental storytelling or notes, and are just spots for us to scavenge. But this doesn't happen enough. There's enough to see in Redfall where we'll get distracted for hours, we'll see a collectible nearby, or a building that looks interesting. Redfall is one of those games where we ignore the main missions and create our own objectives, and to me, this is the sign of a great open world game. Or at least it is in single player. In multiplayer, the open world isn't as good. We still scavenge locations for supplies, but the stories within them fall by the wayside. When I played with my mates, we never stopped to sit there and read a note together, as we were talking to each other over voice chat. Arkane does make notes pop up on everyone's screen if somebody in the party finds one, but still, we never read them. It's a shame, because if you play the game with a group of friends, you'd be missing out on the best part of Redfall, the stories and exploration. And when this is combined with the issues I saw, I struggle to see how this works as a multiplayer game. The single player aspects are great, because this is what Arkane are good at, but in multiplayer, Redfall isn't as strong. We can see the conflicting ideas that plague development play out before us, and like the developers at Arkane, I don't see how this works either. While Redfall is good at times, it has so many other parts that are terrible because of the multiplayer. And what we're going to discuss for the rest of this review is so bad that it will ruin the game for you. These are parts of the game that needed completely overhauling, where 1 year was nowhere near enough time to fix them.
My name was Grace before. They called me the Gateway.
The premise of Redfall works on paper. Kill 4 vampire gods and take back the town of Redfall. Along the way, we learn that the vampire gods were regular people who turned into vampires after something suspicious happened at Avon, the local pharmaceutical company. That sounds like a great game, doesn't it? Well, unfortunately, Arkane has executed this premise in the worst possible way. The main issue is the way the story is told to us, which has not improved over the last year. The Blue Ghosts are an appalling way to tell a narrative, because we never see actual characters in front of us, and as a result we don't learn about their personalities. There's no characterization based on the way they look or move through the world, as every Blue Ghost is the same. It's like going to the theatre, and instead of watching real actors on stage, we watch a set of mannequins while the actors deliver their lines from behind the curtain. And sure, other games use these methods too, but they're always used to add more depth on top of high production cutscenes, or they're used by indie studios when the budget is tight. They should never be used as the main narrative device in a AAA game made by Arkane. What I find most insulting about this is the way our character speaks to us like we're idiots. After we watch one of these echoes, Layla always asks the most basic questions to make sure we're following along. She was shocked that a vampire god was keeping his daughter locked away, yet I'd already discovered this by reading notes minutes before, and at the very end of the game, she realises that the source of the vampire's power was actually a person, something that anyone with 2 brain cells would have realised hours before this. A lot of Layla's lines also ruined the best moments in the game. Every time we see something cool, Layla will say a cheesy line.
It's a giant dollhouse. Well, I don't know what I expected.
Or she'll ruin all of the tension in a haunting space by saying this.
Freaky woods? Really? I'm in some freaky woods now?
And she randomly comes out with lines like this.
Time to get out there and kick some monster butt.
Other characters were no better, by the way.
I can't believe I'm fighting these things with fangs.
I always found these lines didn't work because it creates this weird contrast in tone between the serious horror moments and these light-hearted quips. It didn't work in the Saints Row reboot, and it definitely doesn't work here. Please stop writing like this. The cutscenes have seen no improvement either. We still have still images of characters frozen in time as our hero provides narration over the top. I don't get why they're here, because they could have been cut and it wouldn't have affected anything. They just summarise our objective before we start a mission, and rarely add anything more. But the thing is, we always know what our objective is because we can read about it when we select a mission. Then when we complete a mission, this annoying window pane pops up and literally just describes what we've done. The mission we've read about, watched a cutscene about, and literally completed seconds ago. Why? To me, these storytelling methods are only here because Redfall is multiplayer. Clearly, Arkane was worried that people playing with their friends wouldn't understand what's happening in the story. It makes sense, right? When we play with our friends, we focus on what we're doing, rather than getting bogged down on why. Not everybody would read the mission description, so the cutscene is here to explain what we're doing to the party. Then if we skip the cutscene, we have the window pane that explains everything at the end. Plus there's the annoying lines of dialogue from our character to remind us what we're doing along the way. It makes sense from a design perspective, but it wasn't worth the sacrifice to make it work. They've dumbed everything down and wasted the potential of the original premise. The missions too are the same as they were on launch. They still have repetitive objectives where we go somewhere, shoot enemies, and interact with an object. Most missions don't elevate the combat with unique set pieces or interesting boss fights, which makes the gameplay blend into one. Even the 4 vampire gods don't help, as I felt like I'd seen this type of boss hundreds of times before. They all felt seriously outdated. Arkane tries to add drama to inject life into the game, as we're given missions that involve the families of the main characters, but they fail every time. We'll search for someone's missing brother in one mission, but then we never try to find them again. Or someone will double-cross us, yet we never seek our revenge. There's never a branching mission chain with twists and turns. Instead, characters are killed in throwaway moments in the open world, or these plot points fizzle out to nothing. What I'm describing are the highlights, by the way. Some missions are way worse than this. Some of the side missions have objectives like retrieving someone's taxidermy squirrel, or giving someone whiskey as a present. It is so low stakes, considering we're in the middle of a vampire apocalypse. Can these things not wait? The problem is that some of these missions have to be completed to progress the main story. We have to complete a safe house mission so we can defeat the underboss in that neighbourhood, and then use their skull to unlock the lair of a vampire god. And if you thought the side missions sounded bad, the safe house missions are next level. They're like the worst world event we'd see in an MMO, with objectives like defend a point as enemies attack, or search for a supply crate. The worst safe house mission is where we destroy a cult effigy, as all we do is shoot 3 weak spots to destroy it. Doing this once would be okay, but Arkane reused these missions to pad out the map. Oh, and this mechanic is also reused in a main mission, and then reused again in the Miss Whisper boss fight. I don't believe Arkane ran out of ideas, but I do believe they ran out of time. These repetitive missions would be fine in another looter, as repetition is a core part of the genre. We grind out missions chasing the rarest weapons, as we know the reward of a loot drop is worth it. But this is another area Redfall gets wrong. The loot is so bad that by the end of the game, Redfall is no longer worth playing. For one, the loot pool in Redfall is shockingly low. We only have the most basic weapons like pistols, shotguns and snipers, alongside the UV and stake launchers, which are designed to fight vampires. There's no armor for us to chase with perks that drastically change our build, and there's no explosives in the game, not even grenades. This instantly takes away a core mechanic in combat, where we master the arc of our grenades and use them to take down enemies in one fell swoop. Remy has a C4 ability, but that's all we get. Other weapons were planned to be added down the line, like a composite bow. We can even see this model in the game if we explore Justine Temple's office. According to Reddit, Justine was one of the extra heroes Arkane was working on, and possibly had a grapple ability. But even with these extra parts of the sandbox, I doubt it would have made a difference. I doubt the bow would be better than Destiny or Far Cry, and I doubt the grapple would be better than Halo Infinite. Other games already have these elements, which wouldn't help Redfall stand out. The small loot pool means we'll see the same weapons over and over throughout the game. The shotgun you see at level 1 will be the shotgun you see at level 20 and beyond. We wade through so many gulches and grackles or Nova flare guns that we lose all interest in the loot. There's no unique green, blue or purple weapons, as Arkane reuses all these weapons for each rarity tier in the most basic way. The rarest weapons in the game do pick up some of this slack, as chasing down each unrivaled weapon is great early on. But again, Arkane's inexperience in this genre is shown to us here, as they show their hand far too early. They make unrivaled weapons drop when we're low levels, within the first few hours of the game. I got my first unrivaled drop when I was level 5, then my next one an hour later. This would be fine if there was a big enough loot pool, but just like the base weapons, there aren't enough unrivaled weapons in the game. In total, there's only 13, plus an extra unrivaled weapon for each character. Even without this issue, we can't escape the fact that the unrivaled weapons are poorly designed, as Arkane doesn't understand how to create the rarest guns in a looter shooter. They get that the rarest weapons need to look cool, but they don't understand we also need unique perks and unique firing patterns with interesting VFX. So many unrivaled weapons feel similar to every other weapon in the game, and even those that look great rarely feel unique in our hands. Except for a pistol that shoots psychic rounds, or Layla's unique shotgun, most weapons have perks like 30% bonus damage or increased reload speed. It's so boring. It's baffling that Arkane didn't learn anything from Redfall's competition. Destiny 2, for example, makes sure that its exotic weapons are unique. It has a rocket launcher that fires 2 rockets at the same time, each with a different element. Or a bow that locks onto our targets when we fire from the hip, which then causes the enemies to explode on precision hits. One of my favourite weapons in Destiny is an assault rifle that has 2 firing modes, one where we hold down the trigger as our firing rate increases, and a second, more powerful mode that is slower and more methodical. Both of these modes are insanely addictive to use, but it also means we can swap between them, adding more variety to the sandbox. Borderlands 3 also has better weapons with different firing modes, or weapons that link in with our skills to add depth to our build. To be completely fair, there have been some improvements since launch with the 2 new unrivaled weapons Arkane added. The Basilisk Sniper is genuinely great, and it does have a unique perk. The first bullet of the Basilisk is loaded with UV, which means we can petrify vampires with our opening shot, then follow up with our second to smash them. It's the best weapon in the game, but it's too little, too late. All of this ruins Redfall because it takes away the replayability, as there's nothing worth grinding for in the game. It's great early on as we chase unrivaled weapons and explore the open world, but it gets to a point where we've seen everything and we realise there's nothing else waiting for us if we continue playing. With no endgame in Redfall, we'd also have to replay the campaign and push ourselves through the awful missions and poor storytelling another time. I know that some people are replaying the game to try out all the characters, but based on everything I've just described, I wouldn't recommend it. Maybe if more content was added as Redfall eased into its live service cycle, it would be worth returning, but as Xbox called time on Arkane Austin, now we will never know. While the improvements to Redfall have saved it from being one of the worst games ever made, it unfortunately still falls short of the mark. Arkane spread themselves too thinly to tackle the issues that hampered development, and even with a year of solid updates, it still isn't enough. It's clear that Redfall's development was troubled, as the end product feels rushed, even 1 year later. And sure, some of Arkane's DNA is in Redfall, but overall, there's not enough compared to Prey or Dishonored. Everything needed a lot more work to make Redfall great. We needed more regular and unrivaled weapons to make the loot exciting, endgame content to give us something to play after we've beaten the story, and we needed matchmaking and playlists for us to find other people to play with. But above all, the terrible parts of Redfall needed ripping out and completely redesigning. You could have a great time for 15 hours like I did, but in the end, you'd also leave disappointed, burnt out on the lackluster loot and repetitive gameplay. If there's one positive thing to take from Redfall, it's that we can learn from this. We can learn that it's never a good idea to force a talented studio to chase trends and make a game they are either unfamiliar with or uninterested in. There's only so many times the industry can learn this, but I hope that Redfall will be the final nail in the coffin. Let's just hope Arkane's next vampire game has a bit more bite than this.
Times the detail